I had a customer I was meeting with just a couple months ago, and he made a very interesting comment to me, which kind of really rang true in my head. He said, Steve, in the space of information security, there's three problems: people, process, and technology. I said, yeah, that's true. He goes, the easiest of those to fix should be technology, because I'm telling you, I spend all my time fixing the people and the process side of it. I was like, yeah, I mean, I really got that. It's like, yeah, technology should be easy, right? It's the people and process that are really going to make things difficult for you. And I think a great example of that is patch management. All right, it's a process that everyone has to live with, and no one seems to do it well. Some people may. I never see a lot of organizations do this very well. I think one of the easiest things any organization can do to improve the process around patch management is, frankly, get out of the operating system patch race. Use a host-based intrusion prevention technologies. There's a ton of them out in the market. Cisco makes one. Most of your AV vendors make one. It's the best thing to do. If you're not running HIPs on your endpoints, really look into it, because I think it's going to save you a lot of cycles from the process perspective of your information security program. On the network side, I think what's really interesting on this space is kind of the evolution of the technology. And where are the things going, and what can we do now as part of a network infrastructure? So if you think of your environment in these terms, and by the way, I think this is a great thought exercise to do with any organization, is to sit down and figure out what are my 5, 6 mission-critical applications inside my organization that if they blew up, things got really bad. So, just think about that for a second. And if you don't know what they are, that's a great thing to do at your next information security meeting. It's like, where are the keys to my kingdom? So you have these mission-critical applications within your organization. You're going to have some set of security goals that you're trying to achieve with those applications. Typically, what we see is you'll have some set of security services that provide these security goals. A lot of times they're appliance form factors. And then I have my trusty network on the bottom. Well, what we've seen is this evolution of more integrated approaches around security. So what we can actually start to do now is take a lot of those security services and just embed them directly into network fabric. Okay, that's one of the core things of when we say self-defending network, that's what we really mean, is making security a service on the network. Now, you get two camps of thought in this space, right? One is, oh my gosh, I'm now mixing security and network together. I can't do that. That's not a security best practice, right? I have my CISSP certification. Trust me, I know exactly, a lot of people will throw up their hands and say, listen, I can't do that. That's not a best practice. Well, if you look at the history of time, I think one of my favorite examples of how best practices are great in the short term but don't always last in the long term is, remember when VPN came out? I don't know, network VPN technology, and everyone was saying, oh, well, I have to separate my firewall from my VPN. I can't possibly run a firewall and a VPN on the same platform. That's mixing things together. And let's look where we are today, right? Pretty much every firewall vendor, including us, runs VPN technology on top of their firewall. And why do we do that? Why was that acceptable? Well, bottom line was just a cost savings. It was just cheaper to do it. So I think you're going to continue to see this trend of moving security services directly into the network, if for nothing else is to drive down the cost of the implementation. Attribute-based access control, is anyone familiar with that term? This is basically a way of thinking about access control, not just from like a user ID and a password and a role, but from any real-time attribute on my network, from any source on my network. So if you look at the bottom of the stream, you have a user request coming in, and there's some type of enforcement going on, and the user's trying to do some type of action and access some resource. So we can kind of take that information together and then apply it to a policy. A great policy, or a great example of a policy that I like to talk about a lot, is in the financial system. So we've seen a lot of corruption in the financial market. One of the things that we can do in this type of application, this one type of control mechanism, is we can actually do a real-time query to a database. So for example, if you want to set a limit on a trader and say this trader can only trade a maximum of $1 million of shares per day, right? Well, how do I incorporate that into a policy? Well, in this type of environment where I basically externalized my access controls, that query is just another part of the process of whether or not this person gets access to this trade application. And these processes are basically done on a real-time basis. So every time a user makes a new request to do a particular action, I'm checking all these attributes again. And it's going to be the consummation of all these attributes that's going to give me a yes or no decision on whether or not I'm going to allow someone to access something. The general problem of content security on the surface is relatively straightforward, but solving the problem is pretty difficult. And basically, what I want to be able to do is verify the message coming into my environment on either web or email. There's other ports and protocols, of course, but again, most of my business traffic is going over email and web. I want to verify the message coming in, and I want to verify the data going out. Pretty simple, right? I mean, this should be a relatively straightforward problem. Is this request, is this spam that's hitting my mail gateway? Is there data leaking from my environment on an outbound request? These are the types of things that I'm trying to solve. And the easiest way of doing it is just with deep inspection. I want to tear apart every packet that's coming into my application gateway and make sure there's nothing bad going on. And vice versa, every packet that's going out of my environment. I want to tear the packet open and look deeply and see, okay, what's going on in this? Is there business-sensitive data that's leaking out of my environment? Is there something that I just don't want to be going to some certain place in my network? So this, that should work. Well, the problem is deep inspection is very computationally expensive. It's just very hard to do. I need to do it. I won't deny it. You need to do it. But then the question becomes, is there a way that I can basically alleviate some of that deep inspection by doing something else? So another way of maybe thinking about it is, can I do content inspection without looking at the content? And that probably sounds relatively paradoxical to most of you. Content inspection without doing content, without looking at the content. But actually, there is a way you can do that. There is a way that you can help this deep inspection process. And it's this concept called reputation. Okay, so Cisco bought a company a couple years ago called Ironport. I don't know how many of you might be familiar with it. Ironport specialized in email and web gateways, but what they also provided to Cisco was this sender base. Sender base is actually a website you can go to. I've got a screenshot of it on the next slide here. And it's basically a credit score of every IP address and every domain name on the internet. And the idea being is if you have a low credit score on the internet, I'm not going to trust you, or I'm not going to let my traffic from my network go to that site. If you have a high credit score, though, I'm going to trust you more implicitly. So just think of it in those terms. And now it's really interesting what I can do. So as I said before, if you go to senderbase.org, this information is available for free. It won't be as granular as a for-fee service, but it'll certainly give you an idea of whether your IP address or domain names has a high, low, or medium credit score to them. I had one customer tell me, he goes, "Steve, I don't buy any of your products, but gosh, I love this website." I'm like, okay, thanks. Appreciate that. I'm glad someone's using it. But with this information, I can do really interesting things. So let's take web, for example, one of these major applications I got in my environment now. Everything's pumping through my website, right? Well, if I want to know that my employees aren't going to bad websites and potentially downloading bad things, how do I normally solve that problem? Well, I normally solve that problem with deep inspection. On that return stream, I rip the packet apart, I look for bad things inside of it, and I go along my merry way. Well, that's great, but again, the problem is it doesn't scale very well. So with reputation applied to my web gateway, as soon as that outbound request occurs, I'm going to look up the reputation score of the website they're going to, and if they have a bad reputation score, I'm not even going to look at the return traffic. I'm just going to drop the connection right there. So I've done basically no deep inspection at all. I've made a content decision without ever looking at the content.